Hi everyone. So for this video, I'm going to go over the final presentation for APLED 123, and it's related to business ethics and diversity in the workplace. So chapters 13 and 14 in your textbook cover some of these topics that you might be interested in, okay, for this particular assignment. So I'm going to kind of run through. Basically, we want you as much as possible to be thinking about your future career and connecting the classes that we teach here to your future career. Let me close this side box so it's out of the way. So one of the things that you may end up doing is running your own business, in which case you're going to have to make a lot of different decisions, right? Ethical decisions as you start to create your own business in your field. In other cases, you may start out working for someone else, in which case you can still end up dealing with ethical questions and ethical situations where you have to make a good decision, or hopefully you will make a good decision in light of different circumstances. So for this final assignment, students will focus on the concepts discussed in those chapters, and those are related to internal and external customers, business ethics, and diversity in the workplace. Students will design a PowerPoint or other presentation that involves personal experience, research, as well as analysis of a topic related to the content in one of these chapters. MLA citations are required for outside sources, as well as for any specific page numbers referenced in the book. So think about your personal experiences. I tell students to start there. What are some real life experiences you've had in the workplace? And you may be in a completely new industry. So previous jobs you've had might have been in a different industry, right? But still, think about personal experiences you've had that related to ethics and decisions that you had to make on the job, okay? That's where I want students to start before you start doing research, okay? And I'll get to that in just a minute. Deadlines are here and they are in bold, so you need to have come up with a topic and gotten that topic approved by me no later than Sunday, November 29th. So you'll need to get those submitted so that it gives me time to look through them and make sure that I'm okay with everything you've picked out. And if there is a topic or two that I feel like is not a good start, I'll reach out to you. So I almost always approve all topics. The only reasons I would not approve a topic would be if I felt like there's just not going to be much for you to find on that particular subject. And in most cases, there's plenty out there that you could research related to whatever topic you're interested in. Then the rough draft is due the following week, and then the final submissions will be submitted 30 minutes prior to the first presentation for the group. That'll happen near the end of exams week. I'm shooting for Thursday and Friday of exams week, which is December 10th and 11th for all students. So need to have research from 3 outside sources. They don't have to be academic in nature, but they do need to be reliable, okay? So don't just go to Wikipedia or about.com. Go a little bit deeper than that. PowerPoint is expected unless you receive prior permission from me, okay? I'll post the actual grading rubric prior to the deadline. I'll go ahead and try to get that up in the next few days so that we have just a set of boxes of like 10 points for this, 10 points for this, 10 points for this that you can look at, okay? Helpful starting points, and this is where I want every student to start, okay? This is a journal topic, but it's also a good starting point to help you start thinking about this presentation. Doesn't mean that what you come up with for your journal is exactly what you have to go with for the final presentation, but it helps you get started thinking about this, okay? So review a couple of the real world examples in your textbook, so that can be from any chapter actually, and think about a situation that you've been in before in a real life work setting where you had to make an ethical decision. Describe the scenario and what you did in the midst of the situation, then analyze what could have or should have been done differently to improve the outcome. So for this first part, you do not have to do any research, and it specifically says that on your journal entry for this week. No research is involved. Just share a story. So the bold part is where it's asking you to share a situation. The not bold part is coming later. If you choose to go with this for your presentation, you'll need to do some research. We looked at one real world example earlier in the quarter that happened with United Airlines where they had overbooked a flight. Someone was going to have to give up their seat. Nobody volunteered. So the last person to book was selected to have to move to a different flight. The guy refused and sat like absolutely in his seat and would not move. And they finally had to call security to come and remove him from the airplane. Well, people took photos of this. The guy put up a fight, and then they got into a fight with security, and then he ended up with like a bloody nose, and he ended up getting physically dragged off of the airplane. That little video went viral. There was lawsuits. There was all kinds of problems that happened. And all of that occurred. That's an ethical decision that the people who were working there had to make on the spot. The airline hostess walked up and said, "Sir, I'm sorry, but we've got to have you switch to another flight." They got into some words. These are real things that happen, right? Like that went viral. That was a big deal. But how many of you, if you think about previous jobs you've had, have you ever had to call security before over someone causing a problem? I know I have at previous jobs where I've worked. Not at the college so far. Almost actually had to one time at a different school over a weird person showing up who wasn't in my class and kind of harassing our classroom a little bit. So there's, you never know when there's odd scenarios where you've got to make a decision on what to do. The security guards in the United Airlines situation, they had to make decisions too. The head of the company, the manager, had to make decisions. So again, you don't have to think about an airplane, but any previous jobs you've had where you had to make a decision on your feet that maybe you weren't expecting. Maybe you witnessed a coworker stealing. Maybe you witnessed, there's all kinds of things where you had to make some kind of ethical decision. Okay. And so if you'll write a journal about that, sometimes that'll get you thinking about topics that you might want to research further. So for example, with the airline situation, what are policies related to overbooking of flights and people having to change their seat or get on a different flight? Are there any policies out there related to that? How have other airline companies handled the same or similar situations? Is United doing something wrong or something right? Um, how should United deal with that type of situation in the future? Those are things that you could bring into an actual presentation. Tell us what happened, what the scenario was, and then analyze some thoughts on what could be done differently, what are other airlines doing, or what could be done better, and then bring in some sources to support that. That's one way to go about this potential this assignment, possibly. Okay. Here's part B here. Another question. Think about a group of underrepresented people in your chosen profession. Discuss why you think this particular group is underrepresented in this field. So if I was going to stay in the field of airline professionals, how many women are pilots? Even to this day in 2020, women are considered underrepresented in the fields of being an actual airline pilot. So what about hostesses? So airline hostesses, how many airline hostesses are men? So, you just think about if this applies to your chosen profession. Your chosen profession you might feel is pretty balanced. But some of you are in professions where there are underrepresented groups, and you might want to just explore that. So the question for the journal topic would be to think about a group of underrepresented people, and then you share your reasons why you think that this particular group is underrepresented. So if I was going to do early childhood education or something like that, I might argue that actually, women might be better suited to that field anyway, or they might just have greater interest among women in that field. Or with pilots, might just be that men tend to be more interested in it, or there might be some other reasons. I don't know. You see what I'm saying? So you can give your just thoughts like off the cuff. What do you think? And then you can start doing further research to come up with some other reasons, maybe why one group is underrepresented in that particular field. And again, that's the starting point for your research. Okay. You could also look into, so say I did do a presentation on pilots, I would research, come up with my own thoughts for the journal, but then for the actual presentation, start doing some research as to like why women have maybe been underrepresented as pilots over the years. Also look into women who are success stories. So someone, Amelia Earhart's like maybe the most famous, but there's actually been quite a few very famous women who flew and just didn't get a lot of media attention. And also, there are many airline companies who are promoting job opportunities for women, etc. I might want to feature some of those, like for example, United or Delta or Air Mexico or other airlines that are actively seeking to hire women and offering incentives. There's so many different routes I could go with that presentation or that idea. All right, part C. What kinds of cultural values or conflicts or cultural values conflicts have you encountered or witnessed at work as a result of working with diverse individuals in the workplace? What actions were taken or not taken to prevent or reduce the negative impacts of this type of situation at work? What actions do you think could have or should have been taken? So I had one student, for example, share that he worked with a coworker who was from Jordan and who did identify as Muslim, and had requested from their manager that rather than taking a 1 hour lunch, he would like to have several 10-minute breaks throughout the day, 3 or 4 10-minute breaks throughout the day, so that if he wanted to, he could go quietly someplace and pray. That was his request. The manager honored that and said, sure, if you don't want to take a full hour lunch, you can just take, a 20-minute lunch and then 2 or 3 other small breaks during the day if you need to disappear for a few minutes and do your thing. And so the co-workers and everybody on the team just kind of worked around that and made it happen. That's how they handled that particular cultural conflict, right? If someone works at a place and they say, I have church on Sunday mornings, and so I really would like to request, unless it's an emergency, I'm happy to work the Saturday night shifts or the Monday morning at 6 a.m. shift, or even the night shift if I need to. But Sunday morning, I would like to be able to go and worship. Like, how is that handled? And these are examples of like religious conflicts, but culture can refer to a lot of different things. The way a person dresses, the way that a person speaks, the language, someone's native language that they're coming from, and maybe English is a second language or other language. Also customs that are common in someone's culture. And now we've kind of got this whole COVID culture going on where we have to like keep our masks on and not shake hands or not be within a few feet of a person, etc. So what kinds of cultural or values conflicts have you encountered before or witnessed before? And then start from there, write about it, and then that may take you to research. Like, what are the laws? What are the rules? What are the protections that might exist related to that type of situation? So, of course, religious stuff is protected, but how many of us could honestly say, I've been in a situation where there was a conflict between something else that I needed to do, maybe a funeral that in my culture lasts typically several days, not just one day, or something like that where there was a conflict, right? You could think through some of those and then start researching what laws actually exist, okay? Last option, think about a particularly bad experience that you had in the past as a customer in relation to your chosen profession or a similar profession. You can also choose to share a bad experience that occurred with someone you know, what was done and what could have been done. If you open your own business in this profession someday, how are you planning to deal specifically with this type of similar customer service experience? So if you are going into the salon industry and you yourself or either someone you know has had a bad experience before, what was the experience? Describe what happened, describe how it was handled, and then explain why that was not handled very well and what could be done differently. Because remember that chapter 13 deals a lot with customers and customer service relationships and things like that, and what is it that customers want? How do they want to be treated, etc. So if you run your own business someday, or if you're in a supervisory position for someone else's business, you're going to be dealing with lots of customers, and whether it's ethical, right, or wrong, or even if it's the customer just intentionally creating a problem, you're going to be dealing with customers. So think about a bad experience that you personally have had where you were the customer, or either a friend of yours or someone you know was the customer. Describe the scenario, describe how it was handled, and then go from there, okay? And then you can start researching. Was that legal the way that it was handled? Maybe it was legal. Are there other businesses out there who handle that type of situation differently or handle it better? What are some other practices that are going on maybe in other states? Maybe other states do have laws about it. You see what I'm saying? So there's so many different directions you can go with some of these. I'll share really quickly before I close this video a couple of good topics that students have come up with. I had a student actually research about false advertising in response to question D. He shared a personal experience he had had as a customer where there was false advertising. And then he actually looked up the laws and rules related to false advertising. Like, what is false advertising according to the law? Can someone be sued for false advertising? At what point is it just considered an exaggeration versus at what point is it actually considered false? And he gave some really good examples of lawsuits that had actually won against companies where they had promoted something to the customer, sold it to the customer, and then it wasn't the product that was advertised. And it was like a really big, expensive product, something major. And the customer actually went and sued and won in court over it. So that was a really cool presentation. He just looked up court cases where people had sued for false advertising. For part C, I think I shared the one scenario with you where a student had worked with a person who was from Jordan and who identified as Muslim. He looked into some of the rules surrounding religion and religious exemptions, and things of that nature. And he kind of just basically gave us an educational session on how those laws differ a little bit in certain states, but and what protections basically people have if they need to claim a religious exemption for something. Kind of cool. Right here, underrepresented people. I gave you the example of women in terms of being pilots. I've also had students say in like the automotive industry or in welding or in other fields where women were very underrepresented, and so they looked into different reasons for that. Um, I've also had, for one of the real world examples, I had a student who looked at drug testing in his particular profession. He was going into electrician or something, I believe, and mandatory drug testing is part of the process or the requirements. Yet he had actually been in real world scenarios where there were people getting around that in all kinds of different ways. And so he analyzed, it was a fun presentation. He analyzed different ways that individuals as well as companies can cheat on drug testing requirements. He also analyzed ways, new technology and new ways that were coming out that were getting to be more and more and more effective for actually cracking down on enforcement of no drugs in the workplace and things like that. So it was kind of cool that he showed both sides of it, like different ways that people, whether it's an individual or the company itself, beats that requirement or gets around that requirement on the law or cheats on tests. And then also ways in which technology is getting better and better and better and better, and in policies that are getting better to try to catch people who are doing that. So it was kind of cool that he showed both sides of the coin in that presentation. A couple of other good presentations that I have seen and that I'm going to try if I can get permission from a couple of the students, I'm working on that. One student who was in baking looked at false advertising of actual bakery products. So bakery products are being made like on the spot and sold that day or the next day. They're not pre-packaged, but the FDA and the Food and Drug Administration still has some laws are related to that, about that you have to label what types of foods are in even a fresh baked product, because you don't want people to have allergies to those products and then get sick or be in a dire situation. Well, he actually worked at a place where they were falsely labeling baking products, stuff that had been baked fresh that day, and they were saying had real butter when actually it really was margarine that was used. They used margarine because margarine was cheaper. And his concern was stuff such as nuts or stuff such, things that people might be allergic to, but also the fact that even though butter and margarine usually aren't reasons for an allergy, they do contribute to diabetes. And so somebody could honestly feel that they are eating a healthy diet that's got only made with real butter when really it's margarine that they're eating, and they're buying something fresh from the bakery because they're trying to eat something that's healthier than a prepackaged loaf of bread or whatever. They think it's healthier for them by getting it fresh, and then actually it wasn't. So he analyzed a lot of the laws related to the FDA. I had another student who had a really popular presentation. A lot of the other students liked it. It was related to growing medical marijuana, and he had worked at 2 different farms, and he was looking at some of the ins and outs of the laws here in Washington related to that, and also some of the loopholes here in Washington that are currently being worked out, some of the kinks in the system that are kind of being worked out, and then some that still aren't being worked out, and things to be aware of as a consumer if you are purchasing medical marijuana as a product, things to look out for. And that was kind of scary, but kind of cool and great information too. And a lot of the classmates liked it. So I'm tossing out some of these as ideas. I had a student last year who did one on house wiring. And so houses have to go through an inspection before they're ever put on the market for sale. But that doesn't mean that once it's been bought and owned by one person, that person can't go in and do some wiring on their own and do some fix-its on their own. And he actually was in a basement of a house one time and saw that something had been dangerously rewired, probably by just the owner, but not by an actual electrician. His supervisor told him not to do anything about it, not to report it, and not to fix it because it would take too long and they weren't getting paid to fix something like that. But he recognized like this literally could cause a fire. So he spent the extra time, he fixed it. And what he had investigated, though, for the research part of his presentation was, what are the laws about this? Does a homeowner have the right to go in and change up their own wiring if they want to? Yes, they do. Whenever the house goes up for sale again, he advised it's always good to get a second inspection, not just from because the real estate agent and everyone else is wanting to sell the home. You need to get your own, and even if it's $300 or $400, you need to pay one extra outside person to come in and do a second house inspection for you before you settle on that house. So, I mean, anyway, I've had quite a few good presentations that came out of last year. As always, email me if you have any questions, and I will be posting once I get written permission from a couple of students. I've reached out to 4 different people, so I'm hoping that a couple of those will come through with an approval for me to post their examples. I do always ask for permission from the student. I'll post those examples for you guys to look at, and I will also post a little box by box checklist of like 10 points for this, 10 points for that, so that you can see the grading rubric. Have a good day, everybody, and thanks for watching.